Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Midlife Crisis, the show where I talk about every major DC crossover event, including tie-ins most of the time. It really depends on how I feel. This week, we're going to be talking about Identity Crisis and The Secret of Barry Allen, which is a Flash arc that takes place during Identity Crisis. They both happen at the same time, they're both tied into each other, so I thought I would cover them both at the same time. This will be my first time reading, reacting, and talking about Identity Crisis. It is a huge crossover event, like not in terms of scale, but in terms of impact on the DC universe, especially on comic books at the time. Like it really pushed the envelope on what you could do in a comic book, in terms of like the actual content within, really pushing those limits on violence and controversial topics, as well as just how the industry was working at the time. Because the history behind the book is that the writer, Brad Meltzer, who is a famous novelist, was brought into DC because at the time, comic books weren't considered to be very cool. So you weren't having like screenwriters and novelists coming in and writing for comic books very often. Like it was not a common thing. But then in 2001, DC got Kevin Smith. Like Kevin Smith wanted to write Green Arrow, and so they brought him in, and that was a huge deal because Kevin Smith was massive. He was making all these incredible movies, and he came in and he revolutionized Green Arrow and comic books. By being such a big name, he made comic books cool, especially for those outside of comic books to write. So they started getting bigger names in, and it's because Kevin was working on Green Arrow that they were able to get Brad Meltzer in to write Green Arrow after Kevin left the title, which he left on purpose. It's not like he was taken off or anything. He handed the book over to Brad, and Brad wrote a 6-part arc on Green Arrow called Archer's Quest, which has gone on to become one of the most popular Green Arrow arcs of all time. And because of the popularity of that arc, DC were like, we want to do something bigger with you, Brad. We want you to do another story. It's going to be a limited series, but we don't want it to just be a comic series. We want it to be an event. Like, we want it to be a major event that's going to turn the DC universe on its head. And Brad eagerly accepted this, but he had a couple of things that he wanted the series to be. One, he wanted the series to be more of it wasn't a comic book series, it's a book. Like he had the mindset of, I am writing a book, and DC had the mindset of marketing it more as a book than just a comic book, even though Brad and a lot of people saw that kind of being the same thing. So that's kind of mindset that he went into, was that he was writing a novel that looked like a comic book. And another thing that he wanted DC to do was to not spoil anything, because at the time DC would release like previews of comic books, and they would send comic books out weeks early to retailers so that they could spoil it to people who want to hear spoilers. And Brad was like, don't do that with this. I don't want you to do that. Like, I want nobody to know what's coming, because when I write a novel, you don't know what happens in chapter 12 until you get to chapter 12 and it hits you in the face. So I want that to happen with this book. I don't want anyone to know what's going to happen until they read it. And Dan DiDio, who was editor in chief at the time, agreed. DC went with it, and they didn't send out previews, or they didn't send out copies to retailers early. They kept the scripts under lock and key. As far as I know, the only people who knew what the scripts were Brad Meltzer, Rags Morales, and Dan DiDio, the higher-ups at DC. Nobody else knew. Brad didn't even know who had the scripts. He just knew that they were hidden somewhere. and then Identity Crisis was released to worldwide acclaim, but also a lot of controversy because of some of the material within the book that we're going to be going through when we read it. Probably one of the most controversial comic books of all time in terms of content. It's widely regarded as being one of the best written books of all time. But yeah, there's some stuff in this that content warning for sensitive topics like sexual assault, violence, specifically sexual violence, murder. So if you don't want to listen to a story about that kind of stuff, this story gets very heavy. It can get quite depressing. Just putting that warning out there. So without further ado, let's just get into the book, shall we? Let's get straight into Identity Crisis. But before we do, if you're enjoying the content, if you like the videos that I'm making, then please feel free to subscribe. I'd love to have you here and to, keep watching my videos because every single view means a lot to me. So yeah, let's move on to Identity Crisis Issue 1, written by Brad Meltzer with art by Rags Morales and Mike Baer. So we begin with Ralph Dibney, the elongated man, and another character known as Firehawk, who is usually connected to Firestorm as like a partner in crime for him occasionally, but now she's kind of gone on her own. She hasn't really been featured in comics often until now. She's out on patrol with Ralph. They're looking over a crate that is in an alleyway being guided by two guys who are waiting for a dealer to arrive who's going to pay for the crate. And they're kind of wondering what's inside. They come up with a couple of ideas like, oh, maybe it's a Mazo. Maybe it's, a mother box or something. And then they start to have a conversation about Sue Dibney, Ralph's wife. Ralph and Sue are probably the strongest couple in DC history. They're an example of a couple where like Sue has known that Ralph is an elongated man for pretty much the entire time that they've been together, and she's been a part of the superhero community. She wasn't just on the outside, she was on the Justice League, even though she's just a regular woman. It's because she's so good with computers and helping with investigations and stuff, because Ralph is a detective, that she was a viable member, like an important member of the Justice League. And every year for Ralph's birthday, she holds a surprise party for him that involves a mystery that she set up for him to solve. She believes that Ralph doesn't know that they are fake mysteries that she normally gets their friends to help with. Like, the first time she did a mystery that was Barry Allen disguised as an old man that Ralph had to deal with. This time they've got Green Arrow as a part of the mystery, and he's going to jump out of a cake as a surprise. But what Sue doesn't know is that Ralph has always known that she's been making these fake investigations for him to solve, these fake mysteries. He knows that she sent him out on patrol because she's setting up the surprise right now. He knows that she did it in the past with Barry Allen. He knows that the current one is going to be Oliver Queen, Green Arrow. So he knows that it's all a surprise party and stuff, but he doesn't want to ruin the surprise because that's how much he loves his wife. He loves the fact that she goes through the trouble of doing it for him. So he likes to allow her to think that, he knows it's a mystery. Because he's a good husband and he loves her. So something goes wrong off panel. Something happens that causes different members of the Justice League and different superheroes to get a call in their communication devices that warrants an urgency. Clark is with Ma and Pa Kent. Ma Kent is swooning over Alan Scott. She's always had like a crush on him, which I think is kind of cute. And Clark gets a call on his communicator and quickly heads off because he's like, something's happened. This is dire. This is urgent. Like, something bad happened. Nightwing is visiting a graveyard. Dick Grayson's parents died when he was very young during a circus accident, and so he's visiting their grave because Batman has always taught him to never forget. And Starfire shows up to see how he's doing, and he's like, why are you here? And she's like, well, we dated for a long time, so I know that you come here every year. And while they're having a little talk together, Nightwing also gets the urgent call on his communicator. Oliver Queen and his son Connor Hawke are practicing boxing each other, and Ted Grant shows up, and they talk about how Green Arrow is a part of Sue Dibney's surprise party for Elongated Man, and then they get a call through their communicator as well, and they're like, oh, what's going on? Oh no, something bad happened. I think the party just got cancelled. Ralph goes through the history of how he met Sue. What the public doesn't know is, because everyone thinks that Ralph met Sue the night that he crashed a debutante ball held by Sue Dibney, which is the same night he met Barry Allen, the Flash. But he actually met Sue when they were kids. Like, they've known each other since they were children. It just wasn't until then that they officially started getting really close. And then eventually, they got married. She became a member of the Justice League, and Ralph talks about how, like, he loves her because, it's as simple as she loves him with her entire heart. And even though she's been around people like Superman and Aquaman and Green Lantern, like all these very, like, handsome men with beautiful eyes and stuff, like, she's always had eyes for Ralph. And he's like, that's why, like, she's everything to me. She could have picked any of these other superheroes, and she picked me. So, this crate that is in the alleyway, the dealer that is coming to buy the crate is this guy named Bolt, who is a villain that can teleport. And he's currently in communications with another villain called the Calculator because he wants to know what's inside the crate. He's afraid of meeting the guys outside the crate because he knows that Elongated Man and Firehawk are nearby, and Calculator is like, look, you shouldn't be so afraid of superheroes, man. Like, Elongated Man and Firehawk aren't as dangerous as you think they might be. And so Bolt decides to eventually bite the bullet and go out and meet these two guys where the crate is. And so while he's meeting these guys, Sue is at home wrapping up Ralph's gift for his birthday, which is a magnifying glass. Ralph knows that she's bought a magnifying glass for him. He kind of deduces it. But what Ralph doesn't know is that there's a little hidden surprise in the gift that we don't get to see. But Sue mentions that she's put a little hidden gift that even a detective would not be able to find. And then she hears a noise coming from in the house. She's like, what? What was that? And she goes over to, like, a staircase. It's like, hello? Like, Ollie, is that you? And one thing that's really cool about... So, Rags Morales did the art for this, and the gift is designed to look like Elongated Man's old costume. It's the same colors, purple, white, and black, which is really cool. I think that's great. His current costume is, like, red and black. But that one, like, I like that the parcel is designed to look like his old costume. So, yeah, Sue goes to investigate this weird noise. Bolt goes out to see these two guys, and he tries to take the crate from them without paying, and they just draw guns and shoot the crap out of him. And Dibney is like, oh no, like, shit's gone wild. I gotta call Sue and see how she's doing, like, give her an update. And he goes through his communications, is like, Sue, are you there? And he doesn't hear back, and he's like, Sue? And Firehawk's like, what's wrong? And he's like, Sue hasn't called back. Like, Sue isn't talking to me. That means something is incredibly wrong because she always, like, talks to me. Like, she's never, like, she's always there. She's always ready to listen. we see Sue get shoved onto a table, which gravely injures her, like really badly, like mortally wounds her. And Bolt gets shot a million times through the chest, and he falls backwards into the crate behind him, breaking the crate. Then he falls onto the ground, and he's barely alive. He's still alive. He's like, "What are you two doing, like, you idiots? Like, please call an ambulance." And they're like, "All right, 911, like, we have a problem down here." And they call an ambulance, and we find that the thing that was in the crate behind Bolt is a Lexo suit. One of the suits that Lex Luthor wears to fight Superman. Whoever shoved Sue over onto the table approaches her. We don't get to see who it is. Stands above her and is like, "Goodbye, Sue." And then shoots a ton of fire at Sue and just roasts her body. And Ralph immediately heads back home because he knows something's wrong. And when he gets there, he finds the house is completely torn apart. And then he finds the body of Sue with intense third-degree burns as she's been roasted alive. And she's dead. And Ralph is no longer a married man. Ralph is now a widower. Tim Drake, who has recently revealed his identity to his father. His father is having a hard time dealing with his son being Robin. Sees on the news alongside his father that Sue Dibney has died. Because Sue was so deep within the superhero community, it hits everyone incredibly hard that she's passed away. Black Lightning and Katana receive notice of what's going on, like they on their communication device, but Black Lightning ignores it because he thinks like it's not, like he's just like, "Oh, it's probably fine. It's probably just like something going on with the superheroes." Like, so he doesn't know yet that Sue's dead until the funeral would happen. Atom goes and visits his Ray Palmer goes and visits his ex-wife and Jean Loring, and she received like half of his patents when they divorced, and now she's signing them back to him. And then he gets a call from the Justice League that Sue's been killed. Green Arrow decides to head to Ralph and Sue's place to investigate what happened, because, you know, Ralph investigated, and then Batman went and investigated as well, and he was kind of like, oh, even though Ralph wasn't in the right headspace, you know, he's still an incredible detective. But Green Arrow doesn't trust that Batman and Ralph were in the right mindset to have seen every kind of clue possible. Because he says, like, Batman's still just human. So, like, he's only human. So, Oliver heads there with a group of superheroes. He heads there with Mr. Miracle, the Ray, the Metal Men, Animal Man, the Atom, and they scope the entire apartment again to see any clues that they can possibly find. And then they have a funeral for Sue, and something that's incredibly depressing is how, like, Green Arrow mentions, like, ever since Superman died, we've sadly been really on top of superhero deaths, where, like, if somebody dies, like, immediately we got a funeral ready. Like, that's what this community has become. Because so many, like, we die so often that, like, we're just churning out funerals. It's just something that we've gotten used to. So it's sad when it's kind of framed in that way, where it's like, Sue Dibney's funeral, like, she means a lot to everyone, but her funeral is kind of just another funeral. Like, it's just another day for the heroes, which is really sad. And so everyone has come to the funeral. They've come in their costumes, which is another thing that Oliver says is unfortunate, that they have to show up in their costumes because it makes the funeral feel less serious. And also there's tons of paparazzi in the funeral too, because someone as big as Sue Dibney dying is all over the news. And that's another thing that Oliver is like, there's only so much we can do. Like, we can't keep people out of here. There's only so much, like, that we can do about that. So unfortunately, we got a million cameramen in here taking photos during the funeral of Sue Dibney. They lift the casket in, and Wonder Woman gives a little bit of a speech, and then Elongated Man Ralph Dibney is called up to the stand to talk about Sue, and he can't do it. He can't say anything. He breaks down in front of everyone. He's like, I can't. I'm sorry. And they're all kind of like, come on, Ralph. Come on, you can do it. And he's like, no, I can't. I can't do it. They start to think about who could have possibly killed her. Oliver runs through a bunch of different villains. Because she was killed by fire, with fire, he decides, it could have been, Firefly, or Heat Wave, or Scorch. And because there was no signs of entry, it means that it was probably a teleporter that got in there. So they also start searching for different teleporters, like Warp and Bolt, which is the guy that we saw earlier who got shot. So we know it's not Bolt that did it, but he is a suspect. And so all of the different heroes go out and search for all these suspects, leaving 5 heroes behind. And these 5 heroes are connected. So we've got Oliver Queen, we got Dinah Lance, Black Canary, we got Carter Hall, Hawkman, we got Zatanna, and the Atom, Ray Palmer. And this is when it's revealed that, the reason these 5 are connected is because in the past, they had a confrontation with Dr. Light. Something happened with Dr. Light, and they believe that whatever happened with Dr. Light, it's very likely that he was the one responsible for killing Sue, because he has a grudge against Sue for some reason, a reason that we're not sure of yet. But Ralph Dibney is 100% sure that it was Dr. Light who killed Sue, and he wants to find Light and make him pay. And so that's where the first issue ends. It ends with Ralph Dibney being like, help me find Dr. Light. So issue 2 begins with Ray Palmer looking around his room, his house, frantically for something, while his ex-wife, Jean Loring, is trying to talk to him, and he ends up finding what he's looking for, which is a crossbow that he hands to Jean because Sue was recently killed, and so he's trying to make sure that Jean stays safe. He's like, you know how to use this, right? Alright, see ya. And he heads off back to the 5 heroes that know why Sue was killed. Hawkman, Zatanna, Green Arrow, Black Canary, and Elongated Man. They're all getting ready to leave. And that's when Hawkman, tells them that somebody is listening in on them. And he looks at a nearby candelabra, and he's like, reveal yourself. And it's Wally West, the Flash. Wally West was listening in on them. He vibrates through the wall. For some reason, he's wearing Barry's costume in this. I don't know why. He wore it in Ignition, but after that, he got rid of it and started wearing his own costume. So I think that's just Rags Morales just drew the wrong costume. And it's not just Wally. Kyle Rayner is also listening in on the conversation. Green Lantern. So he appears, and they're basically just because Hawkman's like, how dare you spy on us like that? And Wally's like, wait, you think we were just spying on you just for the sake of it? It's we knew something was up, because we're not stupid. All of the other heroes got sent out after all these different villains, except for you 5. Come on, we're not dumb. Tell us what's going on, all right? Because we can go get Superman and Clark. I could easily get not Superman and Clark. I could easily get Clark and Bruce because I've got super speed, so I can just head off and grab them if you would prefer that. And they're just whoa, let's not get them involved. Let's just tell them what happened. So many years ago, back when Hal Jordan and Barry Allen were still alive and members of the Justice League, they were off fighting Dr. Hammond. Like, the Justice League was off fighting Dr. Hammond. And Dr. Light broke into the Justice League satellite. Like, the Watchtower. And when he entered it, he found Sue Dibney. And then Light did the unthinkable. He did what makes this story so controversial and pretty horrifying. He blinds Sue with his light powers, and she tries to run away, and he grabs her, and he forces himself onto her, and he rapes her. Like, he grabs onto her hands, he just holds them tight, to the point where, like, because he has light powers, he's actually burning her hands. Like, you can see, like, her hands are sizzling as he's, like, forcing himself onto her. It's so messed up. And, yeah, he rapes Sue. And Barry shows up and sees Light doing it. And he immediately runs straight at Light. He's just like, what the hell? And attacks Light. And Light's just like, it's your weakness, isn't it? I finally got it. And then the rest of the Justice League all show up and they all start attacking him. Or at least, like, the members... the 5 that are involved in this whole thing, you know, Zatanna, Hawkman, Black Canary, Green Arrow, and Elongated Man, they all show up and they all fight Dr. Light and they all, get him off of Sue. And Sue is just a mess, for obvious reasons, you know, and after that, because Wally can't believe what he's hearing. He's like, what the hell? Barry was there? Like, he's never said anything about that. Like, I don't know if I can believe you. Like, that's horrible. And then it gets more complicated than that because, you know, Dr. Light is a sick person. And they decide that Zatanna needs to wipe his memories of this entire day and what he's done to Sue so that he can never do it again. And because, like, Dr. Light is saying, like, I'm not done with just Sue. Like, I'll find all of your partners and I'll do the same to them. Like, he's literally threatening to rape every single member of the Justice League's partners. Like, all of them. It's so messed up. And so Zatanna tries to just get rid of his memories. But she's never done it before. And she accidentally lobotomizes him. Which is why... when Dr. Light fights the Teen Titans in, like, the new Teen Titans comics, he's kind of an idiot. Because it's retconned that he was lobotomized by Zatanna. And Wally and Kyle are just like, this is messed up. Like, I can't believe you did that. You know, and the actual decision to do it ended up coming down to Barry, because they were split on it. You know, half of them didn't want to do it, like Green Arrow and Black Canary. But then the other half did. Like Hawkman and Zatanna believed that it was, you know, that it was necessary. And then Barry had to be the deciding vote, and he decided to do it, which Wally can't believe. He's like, I cannot believe that Barry would decide to go with it and make that choice. And so Kyle and Wally are just disgusted with these guys. And they're just like, we're going to have to put that aside and try and find Dr. Light, because it's likely that he was the one responsible for killing Sue, because he was getting revenge, you know, for them lobotomizing him. Meanwhile, in another satellite that's not the Justice League Watchtower, it's the Injustice Gang Watchtower, I guess you can call it. It's where a lot of supervillains go to hang out. Malcolm Merlyn, or I think he's just known as Merlin in this. I think his name is actually Tommy Merlyn in the comics. Eventually he would get renamed Malcolm Merlyn because of the show. So I'm used to calling him that. But yeah, he goes to the Injustice Gang's Watchtower, where we get to see a bunch of different supervillains, including Captain Boomerang, who will be very important later, and Slade Wilson, who's also going to be important as well. Batman has actually tapped into the Villains Watchtower and is listening in on them, but what he doesn't know is that they're also listening in on him, and they know that, like, the Justice League is monitoring them. And so while the villains are hanging out and talking to one another, They're talking about how Bolt has been shot and stuff, and Merlin's like, hey, that just means more work for us. Dr. Light then shows up. He teleports into the Watchtower and is like, guys, I need help now. And so the the group of 7, like the accompanied by like Wally and Kyle, go off in search for Dr. Light. They find a building that he has supposedly teleported into, so they've gone there to barge in and arrest him. And Elongated Man tries to enter the door, and they're like, wait a minute, this seems a little bit too suspicious. Gotta be careful that there isn't a trap. But they're not quick enough, and the door gets busted open, and Elongated Man just gets, like, kicked in the head. And it's Slade Wilson, Deathstroke. He emerges from the door with Dr. Light behind him, because Dr. Light has hired Slade to be his bodyguard. Meanwhile, Dr. Midnight, another character who is a member of the JSA, he's blind. He's the one, but he's like so smart that even though he's blind, he can still, like, I think he has like technology in his glasses that help him see or something like that. He's the one that's doing surgery on Sue's body. And he cuts open her body, and he sees something that surprises him. Because up until now, they thought Dr. Light killed her because she was supposedly burnt to death. But what he's discovered is that her lungs are still pink. And if she was burnt to death, her lungs would have black in them. Which means that she died before she was set on fire. So Dr. Midnight is like, there's no way Dr. Light could have been the one that killed her, because she wasn't actually roasted to death. Even though Dr. Light could have killed her before roasting her, the story is like, no, it wasn't Dr. Light, it was somebody else. Somebody else killed her first. Dr. Light might have set her body on fire, but she was already dead by the time he got there, or something. And we'll find out what happened to Sue in Chapter 3, possibly. So, Slade Wilson and Dr. Light face Green Arrow, Black Canary, the Flash, Green Lantern, and Hawkman, and the Atom, and Zatanna, and Elongated Man. I might have said a name twice there. A lot of characters, because he's protecting Dr. Light from them, and Wally, without hesitation, goes straight for Slade, using his super speed. But Slade has set up bombs around him on both sides and in front of him. But what Wally does is he runs around the bomb instead, like the explosion. But Slade guessed that he was going to do that, and so he has his sword ready behind him, so that when Wally whips behind him, he gets stabbed through the chest, which puts Wally out of commission. Then Slade goes straight for the others. It's like, new costume, same old mistakes. And he fights Zatanna, and before she can say anything, because she, makes magic by saying things backwards, he jabs her in the liver, causing her to vomit uncontrollably. And then Hawkman comes for him, and there's a really cool moment where like Slade jumps up at Hawkman and just slashes him across the chest, because Hawkman has wings attached to his body. They aren't like actually they aren't real wings, they're just wings. It's like a harness that he wears. He cuts through the harness and the wings fall off, causing Hawkman to plummet to the ground. And this fight was actually recreated in Smallville. It's not a great version of Slade Wilson, but they do recreate this fight with Hawkman. Hawkman doesn't die in this, but in Smallville he does die from it. So Green Arrow and Deathstroke fight one another. Green Arrow is shooting arrows at him, and Slade just like whacks them away. And he goes for Oliver's head, or at least that's what Oliver thinks he's doing, and so Oliver ducks. But Slade was actually hoping he would duck because it allowed him to cut through the tops of all of his arrows off, so that now like Oliver can't shoot any more arrows because like the ends of them are all gone. And Canary tries to come at Slade from behind. Slade grabs like a plastic bag or something from his back pocket and wraps it around her head. suffocating her and causing her to pass out. And then Slade realizes that Ray Palmer has shrunk down, which means he must be coming from somewhere. But, you know, Deathstroke has, like, really keen senses, so he's able to sense exactly where Ray is. He grabs a laser pointer, and he points it at Ray, and because Ray is so tiny, the laser pointer has enough force to send Ray flying, and Slade points the laser pointer at Hawkman as he stands up, because he's waiting for Ray to grow large, because he knows that Ray's going to do that. So Ray grows large, and as he does, he collides straight with into Hawkman, knocking both of them out. It's pretty cool. For some reason, Ray isn't wearing his costume anymore when he hits Carter in the head, like when they collide with each other. He's just not wearing his Atom costume. I don't know why. And then the only member left that Deathstroke hasn't taken down is Green Lantern. Kyle Rayner goes straight for Slade. He tries to punch him for some reason instead of just using a construct on him from a distance, because there's no way Slade would be able to stop it. But no, he doesn't do that. He just punches Slade, and Slade like grabs his hand and then starts breaking Kyle's hand, even though the ring would normally prevent this kind of thing from happening because it has a will of its own that will protect the user. Slade tries to use the ring because he's like, oh, if I hold onto the ring and it's powered by willpower and I have enough willpower, I'll be able to use it. And Kyle's like, you can't use the ring. And Slade is like, we'll see about that. And Slade's an idiot because if Slade had, been reading Green Lantern at the time, I guess, he would know that Kyle Rayner altered his ring so that it can only be used by him. Nobody else can use it. If he's not wearing it, no one can use it. That's actually a thing that he did to it. So yeah, Deathstroke's just wasting his energy trying to use the ring. So while he's crushing Kyle's hand, Oliver appears from behind Deathstroke and stabs him in the eye with one of his arrows. And so Slade is just like, how dare you! And he lets go of Kyle and tries to choke Oliver, and he starts beating him up. And that's when the other members, just like Elongated Man, like wraps his hand around Slade's face, holding him back, and the other members all come in and they all start beating the crap out of Slade. And Dr. Light's just like, oh no! And the image of them all attacking Slade and like holding him back makes him remember what happened to him. He sees flashbacks of him being held back by the Justice League years ago, and I guess he didn't know that Batman wasn't there, because in the memory, Batman is there. So either Rags Morales accidentally drew Batman in the panel, or Dr. Light thinks that Batman was a part of it. But yeah, he remembers what happened to him, and he's like, you took my mind! And then he sends out a massive solar flare, which knocks everyone out off panel. And they awaken to Superman, who has shown up, and he's basically just like, what happened? Why didn't you tell me you were going after Dr. Light? And before any of them can tell him the truth, Wally decides to help them by kinda telling, like, he lies to Superman, but it's like a white lie, where he's like, oh, they were just after Dr. Light because he had attacked Elongated Man a couple of years ago, and Elongated Man was going after him because he thought, oh, maybe Dr. Light killed Sue. And Superman is just like, well, like, you should have let us know, like, we would have helped you, And Oliver tries to talk to Wally, and Wally's just like, wait a minute, I want to ask you a question. So when Dr. Light left, before he left, he mentioned that he wasn't the only villain whose mind you wiped. There were more villains that got mind wiped. Like, what the hell? Dr. Light wasn't the only one? And Oliver is like, yep, he wasn't the only one. And that's when it's revealed that the reason why supervillains never found out their secret identities is because they were always mind-wiping them. So whenever a supervillain found out the identity of a superhero, they would mind-wipe them. and Zatanna was the one that would do it, but she'd never, changed the villain's personality before, which is why when she tried to do that on Dr. Light, things went wrong and he got lobotomized. And Wally's just like, you never told the others? Like Clark, Bruce, even Arthur? And Ollie's just like, people aren't stupid, Wally. They believe what they want to believe and hear what they want to hear. And like, there's a panel that zooms in onto Superman's ear, because he's right there. So if he wanted to, he could use his hearing to listen in on a conversation. But he's not doing that. So it's kind of a bit of a hint of like, Superman might know what they're talking about, but he just doesn't want to listen to it. So, Calculator and Merlin and Boomerang are all interacting with one another and working together, and we find out the reason why Boomerang has been, interacting with Merlin and Calculator is because he's looking for someone who is supposedly his son. Apparently, well, according to like news tabloids, Boomerang had a kid with Golden Glider because he slept with her once, and so he's going to see if this kid is actually his or not. And he's really nervous about going in and meeting this guy because he's a supervillain, and he's kind of like, what if he hates me because I'm Captain Boomerang and I'm kind of an asshole? And this kid whose name is Owen Mercer comes out. He's not even a kid. He's like a young man. He's like 18 or something, 19 probably. He comes out and comes to the car that Boomerang is in. He's just like, hey, can I help you? And Boomerang's just like, no, like, I'm all good. And Owen's just like, listen, you shouldn't park here. It's private property. And he's like, oh yeah, I know. I'm just leaving right now. And Calculator's like, come on, like, you need to go in and face your fear, Boomerang. Like, get to know this kid. Like, who knows? Maybe it will turn out well. Maybe everything will be fine. And so we're kind of left on a bit of a cliffhanger of like, will Boomerang get to know his son? Like, what's going to happen with that? Meanwhile, Tim Drake gets back home after being Robin. His dad knows that he's Robin, but he doesn't like the idea of him being Robin. And Tim was elbowed in the face by Cyborg while they were out fighting a villain. And so he had to cover up the bruise with makeup. And Tim's dad is like, is that makeup? Like, did you hurt yourself? And Tim's like, yeah, I just like, a friend at high school, like, he accidentally elbowed me in the face. He's like lying to his father because he doesn't want his father knowing that he's getting hurt doing superhero stuff, because his father will force him to stop doing it. And so Tim's kind of torn, because he loves his dad, but he also loves being a hero. He doesn't want to stop doing that. Meanwhile, Perry White and Jimmy Olsen are developing photos for their article on what's going on, like on the murder case. And Jimmy suggests that maybe whoever killed Sue is going to go after more wives, like more of the partners of superheroes. And like Perry's just like, that's kind of a crazy accusation there, Jimmy. And Jimmy's like, well, it could be true, like it could happen. I'm just saying, like, maybe this is not just a one-time deal. Maybe this is going to be a serial killer type deal. And Jimmy's not wrong, because in Ivytown, at the house of Jean Loring, she is fighting a mysterious assailant who ties her up from the back of her head and hangs her from the door. And Jean is, left hanging and seems to die. Possibly. Because she stops moving. So we'll find out in the next issue whether or not Jean has been murdered. Because there's a chance that she could be saved. If somebody gets there quick enough and resuscitates her, she could live. So I guess we'll just have to find out. So before we get to issue 4 of Identity Crisis, we are going to be reading The Flash issue 214, which is part 1 of The Secret of Barry Allen, the story that takes place during Identity Crisis, where Wally learns, a secret that Barry Allen has apparently been keeping from him. And we'll find out what that is within the coming issues during this story. The issue begins with Wally recapping everything that's happened in Identity Crisis so far. He then heads to Alcatraz Island, where he meets with some of the Teen Titans and Outsiders, including Nightwing and Arsenal. They are currently questioning Munjil Mala and the Brain, who are members of the Brotherhood, because one of their members is Warp, and Warp is a teleporter, and they believe that a teleporter may have been responsible for killing Sue, so they're torturing them to find out Warp's location and where he is. Wally and Nightwing Wally and Dick go and have a conversation outside. Wally tells him that, he's really wants to know where Linda is, and he tells Nightwing, he's like, I really want your help finding Linda. And Nightwing calls Oracle over his communication device and asks her for help in finding Linda. So we'll see how that goes sometime later. See if that goes anywhere. Murillo and Chaya are still investigating whether or not Wally was responsible for the death of Ashley Zolomon. They're starting to believe the best in Wally. They're like, oh, we don't think he's a murderer. But the captain is like, look, I'm ordering you to continue investigating because, the last time they spoke to each other, Wally and Ashley had a massive argument. So as far as I'm concerned, he possibly murdered her still. Wally heads to the Justice League Watchtower where the heroes who fought Deathstroke, Green Arrow, Zatanna, Green Lantern, Black Canary, Hawkman, and the Atom are all there, recuperating after their fight with Slade. Elongated Man is not there. Wally shows up, and the Atom heads off, Ray Palmer heads off to go and see his wife, Jean. Off panel, he finds her dead body. And that is then, spread around across the superhero community that Jean Loring has been attacked. When Wally shows up, he kind of gets in their face and is basically like, I can't believe you lied about what you did, and the fact that Barry was there and he's been lying too, and none of you said anything to me. You turned my uncle into a liar. And Hawkman's just like, how dare you say that, kid? And Ollie's just like, stop. I need to talk to you, Wally. Privately. So Ollie takes Wally aside. Ollie and Wally. And Wally tries to talk to him, and Ollie just hits him over the back of the head and is like, no, you listen. You want to tell us we were wrong? Fine. You want to pretend you don't ever make bad decisions? Be my guest. But don't you dare come in here and lay on this holier-than-thou crap to me and the rest of the league because you feel guilty. And Wally's like, guilty? Guilty of what? And Ollie's just like, of what? It's written all over your face. Sue Dibney was murdered. Elongated Man had a public identity. If this happened a few months ago, before the Spectre zapped the world into forgetting the Flash and Wally West were the same person, it could have been Linda. That's the first thing you thought about. I know you. You're just like Barry when it comes to your wife. So Ollie's point is that, whoever's killing these... Because Geoff Johns keeps trying to make a point where it's just like, oh, the people that have died are people that are related to superheroes who have public identities. Like Elongated Man, the Atom, they both have public identities. But we as the reader know that it has nothing to do with that. Whoever is killing these people is killing them because they were there when Dr. Light had his memory wiped and was lobotomized. So I don't know what Johns is talking about when he's just like, oh yeah, if you still had a public identity, Wally, they probably would have gone after Linda because he's going after the wives of those who have public identities. And it's like, chances are Linda probably would have been fine. If they were going to go after anyone, it would be Iris. But I don't think anyone knows that Iris is living in the present day. She's been keeping her presence here a secret because she's supposed to be dead. But if they were going to go after anyone, it would be Iris because she was Barry's wife and Barry was there, So maybe that's something that's going to happen. Maybe eventually they will go after Iris. We'll have to find out. Ollie's just like, nobody's perfect, kid. Not even the big guy. And when he says big guy, he's referring to Barry. But Wally doesn't realize this until a little bit later. Wally heads off to go and visit Iris and talk to her, and Bart's just like, stop! Like, what's going on? Can't you tell me? Like, after what happened with Sue, I've been here with Aunt Iris, just like talking to her, making sure she's all good. And then Bart's just like, where's Linda? And Wally kind of just looks at him and is like, stay here and don't let anyone in. And Bart's like, I won't. And so Wally goes in and he talks to Iris, and Iris basically reveals to Wally that she knew, Barry talks in his sleep. And so she knew about the whole thing with Dr. Light and everything, and that, pretty much everyone knew except Wally. Wally's like, how could nobody tell me? And Iris is like, there's something that Barry wanted to tell you, but he never got the chance to. Yeah, she's kind of a little bit cryptic with it, where she's like, there's something that Barry wants to tell you, Wally, and you're gonna have to go and find Ollie, and he'll, elaborate on it. So Wally heads off to where Ollie currently is, which is in his like little basement where he keeps all his stuff. Ollie finds a ring given to him by Barry. He opens it up and his costume comes out of it, like a Green Arrow costume comes out of it. And underneath it says, for Ollie, run fast, Barry. Wally shows up and he's like, nobody's perfect, not even the big guy. You weren't talking about Superman, you were talking about Barry. And Ollie's just like, he had the hardest time holding on to the lie. Me? I never thought twice about it. And Wally's like, Iris said you had something to give me. And Ollie's like, here, it's a letter. Barry wrote this for you. He wants to tell you something, so you should go read it. But you might not like what's in it. But it's gonna, because it's gonna be very honest. Barry's gonna be, something really important is in this letter that he wants you to know. And then as Wally leaves, Ollie's like, he loved you, kid. We all do. Meanwhile, some of the rogues, Captain Cold, Weather Wizard, and the Trickster, are talking to Mirror Master because he's a part of, he's in the satellite where all of, Malcolm Merlin and stuff are. Like, Merlin and the Calculator are. They're trying to make sure that they're as far away from this whole Sue Dibney murder as much as possible. Like, the rogues have nothing to do with this. Like, Cold wants nothing to do with this. He's like, Elongated Man didn't deserve this. He didn't even have any enemies as far as we know. So this was just a malicious act for no reason. And that's not how the rogues operate, so we don't want anything to do with this. Send flowers to Elongated Man without a card. Because, we don't want him to know that we're sending him flowers. But I do care and feel sorry for Elongated Man. And then Captain Cold starts to leave, and Weather Wizard's like, hey, we're in the middle of a heist, what are you doing? And Cold's just like, I lost my appetite. And so Wally heads to the Flash Museum. He takes a quick look at the statue of Barry, and then he looks at the letter that was given to him, and he opens it up, and he pulls it out, and he starts reading it. Dear Wally. And we'll find out what the letter says in a later issue of The Flash. But for now, we gotta read Identity Crisis issue 4. So, Jean Loring has been attacked by a mysterious assailant and hung by her door. Ray Palmer arrives, sees his wife, and frantically, his ex-wife, and frantically goes into, the ropes and, uses, force by, growing big enough that he can cut the rope from the inside out. And he manages to detach the rope, untie his ex-wife, and then resuscitate Jean, and she survives. Jean is alive, happily. But now they gotta figure out who did it, because this is the second time that someone has broken into one of their houses and surpassed the incredible, because they made alarms and stuff ever since Barbara got shot by the Joker, they made alarms for like all of their houses that are supposed to be impossible to get past, and yet somebody is getting past them not only once but twice now. So they got to figure it out who did it. This time, so Oliver and Mr. Miracle are investigating the scene of the crime, and this time they've brought Superman with them to help. Because Superman used to be a Boy Scout, so he knows a lot about knots. And he looks at the rope that Jean was tied to, and he says, oh, this is a Dutch Marine twist. And so Oracle puts it into the system as to like who is most likely to be a supervillain that's really good with knots, and they're like, oh, it's probably Slipknot, right? Now at this point you would probably assume like, oh, Slipknot didn't kill her, this villain is just framing other villains by using their techniques, because, you know, he killed Sue with fire, and now he's tried to kill Jean with rope. But no, they do assume that it is Slipknot at first, and they go to question him, and they bring Wonder Woman with them, and she uses her lasso of truth on Slipknot, and he didn't do it. And, yeah, they tell Clark, and Clark's just like, what? Like, he didn't do it? Like, then who did? And they kind of put two and two together, and they're like, well, Slipknot and Dr. Light were both members of the Suicide Squad at some point, so maybe this is related to the Suicide Squad. And that kind of narrows it down a bit, but there are a lot of members of the Suicide Squad, so it really doesn't narrow it down that much. Ollie gets really frustrated, and he's just like, we're just on a wild goose chase, like going after every single supervillain, instead of, you know, trying hard enough to find the person that did it. Like, isn't there a better way to do this than just going and finding every single villain and talking to them and asking them if they did it? And Superman's just like, stop having a go at me, Ollie, and go call off, because you're clearly not in the right space right now. And so Ollie's just like, ugh, and he just heads off on his own. We'll find out where Ollie goes a bit later. Some of the villains have gathered together, you know, like Merlin, Mirror Master, Kronos, like Deadshot. And the reason why they're together is they're trying to stay low, because whoever is going around murdering people is ruining their reputation, because he's framing different villains. So they're trying to lay low, because they're just like, he's ruining our reputation, like, we're getting less work because of him. Like, we just gotta wait until the heroes deal with this dude, get rid of this murderer who's ruining us. Meanwhile, Boomerang once again goes and visits the house of Owen Mercer, but he still doesn't have the balls to go out and meet his supposed son. He sees Owen come up behind his, like, beside his car. He's just like, oh crap, and he tries to hide, and Owen approaches the car, and he's like, you're Captain Boomerang, aren't you? And he's like, are you my dad? And so it turns out that Owen knows who Captain Boomerang is, and has a feeling that he's his father because of the tabloids and stuff. And he was like, a guy came up to me, like, he threw a boomerang at me to try and get a photo opportunity, and I threw the boomerang back and cut off his earlobe. And so as soon as Captain Boomerang realizes that his son is just as insane as he is, he suddenly, you know, brightens up and is just like, son, like, you sound like a psycho as well, let's hang out. And so Owen and Digger decide to spend the day together as father and son. You go off for a nice little drive. Alfred approaches Batman to tell him that Superman has deduced that it may be a member of the Suicide Squad that is killing people. And Batman's like, it's not a member of the Suicide Squad. I know that for a fact, because this doesn't benefit any of them. Like, there's no gain. It's the first rule of solving a crime. If you want to know who did it, you need to find out who benefits. And as he says this, we get to see, like, a bunch of different characters of, like, who benefits from this? You know, we see Captain Boomerang and Owen Mercer. We see the Calculator. You know, we see Merlin. We see Elongated Man. we see Tim Drake and his father. So little glimpses at characters and their relationships with other characters, and it's kind of like, is something gonna happen? Are any of these characters involved in this crime? Is this gonna be some weird twist where it turns out that Tim's father is the murderer because he wants to get his son out of... I don't know. That's obviously not gonna happen. I honestly don't know what this whole sequence is supposed to be suggesting. Like when Batman's just like, who does it benefit? And then we see like all of these other characters, and it's like, is this supposed to be like a moment of like, was it Elongated Man? Like, is it possibly Calculator? Is it Merlin? Or is it like Tim and his father? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, what was the point of that? Ollie goes to the graveyard that Hal Jordan was buried in so he can meet with the Spectre, because for some reason you have to go to Hal's grave in order to meet with the Spectre. Like, he probably could have just gone to like Dunkin' Donuts or something and talked to the Spectre, because it's not like he's just linked to this graveyard. I guess it's the most, like, I don't know, has the most memories or something. I don't know, it's the most momentous location. So yeah, Ollie meets with Hal, and he basically asks Hal, he's like, who did it? Who murdered them? Because you would know, you're the Spectre. You're supposed to know everything. And why aren't you going after them? Why aren't you going after this dude and making him pay? Like, isn't that your job as the Spectre? And Hal's just like, it's not as simple as that, Ollie. I answer to a higher power. They make the decision for me to go after, like, whoever they want. I don't get to choose. And Ollie's just like, can you at least tell me who did it? And I was just like, I can't. I'm sorry, Ollie. I truly am. Do me a favor, Ollie. Make them pay when you find them. And Ollie's just like, I've been sharpening arrows all week. And then he's like, so Hal, when are you coming back? And Hal's like, I don't understand. And Ollie's like, yes, you do. We've been at this too long. When are you really coming back? And Hal's just like, well, Geoff Johns is cooking up something right now. A little something called Green Lantern Rebirth. It's going to come out in a couple of months. So check that out to see how I'm going to come back. A little wink, wink, nod, nod at the reader. Lois Lane heads back to the Daily Planet, to greet everyone there. She's talking about how, Clark is currently going through this stuff, with this murder case. And when she gets to her office, she finds something addressed to her, like a letter or an envelope, and she opens it up, and there is a message inside that says, Lois, I know who your husband is. You are next. And so Lois starts to feel panic because somebody is threatening her life. And this is where the story kind of takes a bit of a turn, because now apparently the murderer is going after the wives of people that had nothing to do with what happened to Dr. Light. So it makes you wonder, like, what is going on? Or did Superman have something to do with it? Like, are they about to reveal that Superman was there? Or Superman knew? Is it harkening back to when Ollie was talking about Superman only listening to things that he wants to listen to? So it's like, oh, Superman knows, he's just ignoring it. And because he's ignoring it, now this person is going after Lois? I guess we'll have to find out. Yeah. Alright, The Secret of Barry Allen, Part 2, Reformed. We finally get to learn what was in the letter that Barry Allen gave Wally West. And there's some things I'm gonna have to talk about when I talk about this issue. Some things related to retcons, my feelings on retcons happening in this, because if you didn't know, I've read everything when it comes to The Flash. I started, like, very first Barry Allen issue and all the way to now. So, yeah, I've seen it all. And there are some retcons in this that just don't sit right with me at all. But yeah, Wally reads the letter that Barry gave him, and basically Barry just goes over everything that we already know I think Geoff decided to go over the entire Identity Crisis event just in case people weren't reading Identity Crisis and they were only reading this. But the new stuff that Barry reveals to Wally is that Hunter Zolomon wasn't the first villain that Barry didn't kill, but, like, he'd messed with another villain in a pretty terrible way before... not Hunter Zolomon. Why did I say Hunter Zolomon? Eobard Thawne. See, I'm getting the two characters mixed up. That's what happens when you have two Reverse Flashes. When he like... Reverse Flash wasn't the only villain that Barry had done some pretty nasty stuff to, you know. Reverse Flash deserved to die. But there was another villain called the Top, who Barry had a pretty long history with. Roscoe Dillon. Originally, he was just your everyday rogue who had the ability to spin like a spinning top, only, Geoff retconned that not only does the spinning make Roscoe smarter, but also he had, like, vertigo powers even back then, which he's going against his own writing here, because when he reintroduced Roscoe Dillon, Roscoe mentions that, like, his powers are evolving and now he's getting smarter and also causing vertigo. But now Geoff is saying that, like, he was able to do that at the very start anyway. Like, what? You can't say in a later issue that he's just started gaining those abilities and then say in another issue that, no, he already had those abilities at the beginning. Like, it's a pretty big retcon that doesn't fit with the history, like, the pre-established history. This whole thing affects a lot more than just the Top as well. It affects Barry Allen as a character, because basically what happens is the Top has done a lot of terrible things to Barry. One thing he did in particular that was really weird was the Top died from, like, a brain tumor because his powers caused a brain tumor and he died. And he blamed Barry. He said that Barry's vibrations triggered the tumor and made it grow, and he died from it. And his spirit took over the body of Barry's dad at one point, and Barry was able to exorcise the spirit out of his body. And then Geoff retcons that the Top came back one time and tried to dig up the body of Iris West. As far as I know, this did not actually happen. This is a retcon that Geoff put in. He tried to dig up the body of Iris West, and Barry stops him and is like, that's the last straw, and he takes the Top to the Justice League Watchtower, and he asks Zatanna to change his personality, something they had already done to Dr. Light, and now he wants them to do it to the Top. Something that Green Arrow is incredibly against, but Zatanna decides to do it anyway, and they change the Top's personality and make him into a hero. So the Top starts fighting alongside Barry against the Rogues, but the Top doesn't want to be a hero deep down, and he knows it, and he tells Barry that he's struggling with being a hero because he has memories of being a villain, and he doesn't want to be a hero. He wants to be a villain. And being forced to be a hero starts to break his mind, and eventually he goes insane, and that's how he ends up locked up in Iron Heights in a straitjacket, and it's why the Top is currently just completely insane. And so that is the secret that Barry has been keeping from Wally all these years, is that he was responsible for what happened to the Top. He's the one that made him go insane. And it just makes Barry look like a terrible piece of shit. Like, it just makes him look like a terrible person, but it also contradicts some stuff that happened in Trial of the Flash. This is the problem that I have with this retcon. And just one of my problems with Identity Crisis in general. So in Identity Crisis, Oliver Queen was against them changing Dr. Light's personality, like attempting to do that, which eventually led to his lobotomy. He was completely against that. Barry was for it, right? So they were against each other. So you would think like Oliver Queen would have some kind of resentment against Barry for being okay with what they did to Dr. Light, right? After that, a long time after that, is when the trial of the Flash takes place. If you don't know what it is, Barry Allen killed Eobard Thawne, who was trying to kill Barry's new girlfriend Fiona, and then went on trial for it. And eventually, it's a long story. You can go watch. I made a video all about it. I think it was the first video I ever made. You can go watch that, and it's the entire history of the trial. The point is, in the trial of the Flash, Oliver Queen sided with Barry. So what happened was, after Barry killed the Reverse Flash, the Justice League had to decide whether or not he was able to stay a member because he murdered somebody, right? And they were split. The vote was split. But Oliver was one of the members that believed that Barry did the right thing in killing Zoom, right? And in the end, Superman had to make the deciding vote. Now, the thing that doesn't make sense about that is that, like, why would Oliver Queen be all for Barry killing Eobard Thawne, but he wouldn't be okay with them trying to change the personality of Dr. Light? Like, why would he be okay with murder of a supervillain, but not lobotomization or changing the personality or ridding the memories of a supervillain? Like, it just doesn't make sense, And also, why would Oliver choose to side with Barry during the trial when Barry didn't side with him when it came to Dr. Light? And Barry made the decision that Oliver disagreed with. You would think that after that, Oliver Queen would be like, I'm not going to side with Barry, because you didn't side with me when it came to Dr. Light. And we don't believe in the same thing. So I think it's just an example of Brad Meltzer not researching enough, trying to make it fit, he didn't have to make Oliver Queen be the character that was against Dr. Light being, having his personality altered. What he should have done is he should have had Oliver Queen before it and then pick somebody else to have Oliver's role instead. That way you're not contradicting historical moments within continuity. So that's my biggest problem with Identity Crisis, other than obviously the controversial topics like the rape and the misogyny within the story. It's also the contradictions of prior continuity that I'm really not a fan of, and this new establishment of Barry just being a pretty terrible person, doing some pretty terrible things that don't feel like they're in character for Barry. I think it's kind of crazy to be like, oh, well, Barry's done this before he killed Reverse Flash. Killing Reverse Flash was supposed to be the first time Barry ever stooped that low. By making him do something similar to the top before that, something terrible to the top before that, it completely takes away the whole point of Trial of the Flash, which is Barry doing something heinous that he's never thought of doing before. Crossing that line. It just doesn't matter anymore when he already crossed the line before then. And that's why I think Secret of Barry Allen is just not a good retcon at all, because it really takes away from what mattered about Trial of the Flash, which was Barry making a choice and crossing the line for the first time in his life. So, yeah, other than that, a couple of the members of the Justice League, Booster and Booster Gold and Blue Beetle, were alongside Firehawk, and they were interrogating Heatwave because, as we know, some of the heroes have gone out to interrogate Fire villains to see if they were responsible for the death of Sue Dibney. Heatwave doesn't get why they are so interested in the death of Sue Dibney, why they care about her so much. He's saved by Pied Piper, who summons a bunch of rats to attack Booster and Blue Beetle and Firehawk. So Heatwave and Piper are able to get away. And Piper explains to Heatwave that Sue Dibney was a member of the Justice League, and that's why they care about her so much. And Heatwave is like, well, the one thing we know about the situation is that even though we're trying to be heroes, they're always going to think of us as the bad guys. They're never going to allow us to be a part of their community. And Piper is like, we're just gonna have to wait until we finish our goal with Jesse, and you'll see, like, their opinions on us will turn around, and they will welcome us into the heroic community. And so Wally is kind of wrestling with this new knowledge that he's learned about Barry and what he did to the top, and he's struggling with whether or not he should return the top's sanity. And he goes looking for Linda, because he's still looking for Linda. He goes and finds Nightwing, because Nightwing asked Oracle's help for finding Linda. Apparently Linda has been signing up for journalist seminars, which Wally is surprised that she's trying to get back into journalism. I don't know if that was backlash from Johns making her a nurse, backlash from fans saying, why, what are you doing, Johns? She's great as a journalist. I don't know. I really hope it means that she is becoming a journalist again, because that would be really cool. I always really liked that about Linda. After that, Wally goes and visits Ashley Zolomon in order to apologize to her for being responsible for what happened to her, because it was an accident. And Ashley is completely fine with Wally. She wakes up and is like, what you did was an accident. I heard you apologizing to me for something that was just an accident. And I've been hearing my husband, talking to me as well. And I hope that one day he forgives me for what I did. And that's when I kind of get taken out of this book, because I'm like, Ashley, you did nothing wrong. Hunter was the one in the wrong. Hunter was the one that made the grave mistake, and you had a reasonable reaction. He was responsible for the death of your father. Not directly, but indirectly. And, you can't just... You're not to blame. Ashley is not to blame. And the fact that she's fronting all the blame really bugs me, because it wasn't her fault that Zolomon went off the edge. It was his own fault. He didn't have to go crazy. But it happened, and it wasn't Ashley's fault. So Wally goes and finds Zatanna in his Flash costume, because he's got a secret identity again. And he asks her for her help, because they're going to go find the top. So it seems like Wally has made the decision to try and return the top's mind. And Zatanna is going to be the only one that can do it. I don't know why he doesn't just go and find, Dr. Fate or something, because Dr. Fate can probably do the same thing. Why is he asking Zatanna? Isn't Zatanna, pretty messed up after doing it twice before? You'd think that she wouldn't want to do it a third time, and Wally's just like, well, it doesn't matter, Zatanna, I'm forcing you to do it again against you. Probably, I mean, he's probably not going to force her, but maybe he would. Maybe he's that desperate. Maybe he would force her to do it. Yeah, I feel bad for Zatanna having to do this a third time. Can't be good for your psyche. Alright, Identity Crisis, Issue 5. We begin with Oliver Queen barging in, trying to find Merlin, because he's, a criminal and might have something to do with the death of Sue Dibney. And when he gets to Merlin's office, he finds himself face-to-face with Merlin, Deadshot, and a villain called Monocle, who's just a guy that wears a monocle. And they all have Oliver at gunpoint, ready to shoot him. But luckily, Ollie didn't come alone. He's come with Kyle, Wally, and Hawkman, Green Lantern Flash, and Hawkman. So they all bust in, they just smash through, the wall behind them. And Hawkman just punches Monocle out. Wally takes all of Merlin's arrows, and Kyle traps Deadshot in a construct. And Deadshot tries to shoot his way out of it, but the bullets bounce around and hit him in the neck. And Kyle's just like, oh no! I wasn't expecting that to happen. We need a doctor! And Ollie is, narrating this, and he's like, Deadshot will do anything to get out of captivity. Even shoot himself in the in the neck. So Deadshot goes for a shot at Kyle and shoots him in the arm. And tries to make a getaway, but he bumps straight into Superman, and Superman helps rein them in. Meanwhile, other heroes are dealing with villains. three heroes in particular, or four heroes actually, are Firestorm, Shining Knight, Vixen, and Captain Marvel, aka Shazam. They're dealing with the Shadow Thief. Shadow Thief goes straight for Shining Knight, takes his sword away from him. Firestorm is just like, okay, Sans, give me the sword, and he gets stabbed straight through the chest by Shadow Thief. And Vixen's just like, somebody go get help. Meanwhile, Ray Palmer is having a conversation with Jean Loring, and, recently she almost died. Ray saved her life, and they're having a little bit of a moment together, and Jean is like, I heard you pray for me when you saved me. It was sweet, Ray. Really. And Ray kind of just, looks at her, and then she looks at him and is like, Dr. Genius, this is the part where you're supposed to kiss me? And Ray and Jean kiss each other. They just have a massive, passionate make-out. It's like Ray Palmer and Jean Loring, lovers. So it seems like, while some relationships are being torn apart, some are being brought together by this as well. So yeah, Firestorm has been stabbed through the chest, Ronnie Raymond. And what happens when a nuclear reactor gets stabbed in the chest? Well, probably explodes, right? Ronnie Raymond kind of looks at everyone, and he's got tears in his eyes. He's like, I'm gonna blow up. And Captain Marvel's just like, fly, hurry. And Firestorm just flies off into the sky. He's like, tell the professor, my family, someone say goodbye to my dad for me. He flies up into the sky, and he blows up. And Ronnie Raymond dies. And he will stay dead for a very long time. That's the death of Firestorm. This story would eventually, this would lead into a new Firestorm volume that takes place at the same time as Identity Crisis. Technically, they count it as tie-ins, but it's just the Firestorm series, so I'm not going to be reading it. But it's all about the new Firestorm, Jason Rush, taking over after Ronnie Raymond's death. One thing I thought about reading this was, Ronnie Raymond probably could have just turned back to normal and not blown up. Because he's not stuck as Firestorm. He can still turn back into Ronnie Raymond. But, and then at least he would have had a chance to survive. He would have been bleeding out a lot, but they would have been able to take him to, the hospital or something and try and save him. But, I guess for the story to work, you can't really do that. But, yeah, Firestorm is dead. Or maybe he can't do that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there was no way of him surviving it. Meanwhile, Digger Harkness and Owen Mercer, father and son. Digger is Captain Boomerang. He's teaching Owen how to throw boomerangs, teaching his son how to be a criminal and use their boomerang weapons. And he's like, you gotta get a bit more power in your arm there, Owen. And Owen's like, all right, Dad. And he throws one of the boomerangs, and it goes straight for Digger and almost hits him in his head. And Owen's just like, Dad! And he quickly zooms in, and it's revealed that Owen has super speed. And he pulls his dad out of the way. He's like, whoa, how did you do that? He's like, I don't know, I just ran. I saw you in danger and I ran. This means that Golden Glider isn't my mother, is she? And Boomerang's just like, no, she's not. Meanwhile, Tim Drake and his father, Jack, have a moment together. Jack has discovered that Tim has been going out as Robin again, which is something that Tim is trying to keep on the down low, that he's because his dad knows that he's Robin, but he's trying to not let his dad know that he is going out and dealing with dangerous things, because his dad is always worried about him. And he's just like, Dad, if you want me to stay, I will. What do you think I should do? Should I stay with you, or should I go out there and help people that are in danger? And Jack looks at the R symbol on his shirt, and he's just like, no, you should go. Definitely go. And Tim's like, thanks, Pops. He's like, I'm proud of you, son. And Jack then heads into the kitchen, and he finds a box with a note on it, and he opens it up, and it says Jack Drake, and the R is an R with a circle in it, which is, it's the same kind of note that Lois received earlier. And he opens up the box, and there's a gun inside that says, protect yourself. And Jack immediately freaks out, and he hides behind his counter, and he calls Oracle. She's like, "This is Oracle," and he's like, "Hi, this is Jack Drake. I think I'm in danger. Like, I think somebody's coming after me. Somebody left me a gun and a note. I think somebody is going to try and kill me." And we see like a shadow of someone in the house with Jack. So someone is in there with him. Meanwhile, Dr. Midnight and Mr. Terrific are operating on Sue's body, trying to get a look at her organs so that they can see if there's any more clues as to how she died or who killed her. Jack is on the phone with Oracle. He's like, "I've got a gun, so I'll be able to protect myself. Just tell Tim that I love him. Like, please, just tell Tim that I love him." And she pages Jack through to Tim, and as soon as Tim finds out that his dad is in danger, he's literally just like, "We gotta turn around, like, Batman, like, Bruce, you gotta save my dad, please." And Batman just looks at Tim. It's like a really, like, it's a pretty heartfelt moment of Batman showing emotion and how much he cares for the people that he considers a part of his family, including Tim. He just looks at Tim, and like then a determined look comes on Bruce's face, and he's just like, "Not again." And Tim's like, "We're gonna make it, Dad. We're gonna make it." And Jack's just like, "He's at the door. Like, Tim, if something happens." And Tim's just like, "Nothing's gonna happen." He's like, "Tim, I need you to focus. Nothing's gonna happen, Tim." And meanwhile, Owen finds a message that he's received on his voicemail. And he presses the voicemail. And it's his father, Digger. And Captain Boomerang is telling Owen that he's going on a job. He's going to do something that's going to put them both on the map. And Owen has a feeling he knows exactly what he's talking about. And so Jack is continuously talking to Tim, and Boomerang is talking to Owen. He's like, "I just wanted to say how great it was today. Honest, it was great. Anyway, if you have some time, make sure to watch the news tonight. Your old dad's gonna finally make you proud. Don't worry, this is the one, lad. I mean the real one. The one that puts us back on the map." And Tim's like pleading with his dad. He's like, "Dad, please." He's like, "What you do for all those people, it's worth it, Tim. Never question it. It's worth it. Dad, we're almost... Tell Bruce to take care of you." And Captain Boomerang's just like, "So anyway, I can't wait to see you later. And watch the news, okay? Because this time, I'm leaving a calling card. Our card." And then Digger just kicks the door open, and both Owen and Tim at the same time are just like, "Dad!" And Jack immediately points his gun at Digger and shoots Digger multiple times in the chest. And the jolt of being shot, sends Digger flying backwards, and he bumps his hand and throws his boomerang that he's got in his hand, and it hits Jack in the chest, and Jack falls on the ground, and Digger and Jack both bleed out to death and die. And so that's where Identity Crisis issue 5 ends, is with the deaths of Jack Drake and Digger Harkness, Captain Boomerang. The parallels between Tim and Owen is really interesting. It feels like they're building it up to be some kind of rivalry between the two of them. I don't know if there ever is. And if there isn't, it's definitely a missed opportunity, Alright, Secret of Barry Allen Part 3, the final part of this 3-part arc. God dang. There's a retcon in this that I like even less than the top retcon. Secret of Barry Allen, definitely, like, it's not as bad as Ignition, but I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like the retcons are really annoying. So I'll explain why. Wally and Zatanna, like Flash and Zatanna, find the top because he is insane, and Zatanna is going to use her powers to try and fix his mind. He used to be in the body of a politician known as Thomas O'Neill, but the top has used his spitting powers to change his body somehow. They don't really go into it. Johns just basically says, like, Top is so powerful with his abilities in his mind that he's able to just change his physical appearance by spitting enough, I guess. So they find the Top, and they fight the Top. Zatanna tries to change his mind, and he doesn't like that, and he breaks out of Wally's grasp, and then tries to, like, and attacks Zatanna, and then fights Wally, and that's when it's revealed that Zatanna succeeded and fixed the Top's mind. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a bad thing. It's a very bad thing, because now the Top is completely sane, or as sane as he could possibly be, and he reveals something pretty drastic to Wally. That the Top is always a top. He's always on top. No one's ever on top of the Top. That's literally what he says. He's like, I'm always on top. No one's ever on top of the top. I'm never a bottom. But he actually reveals to Wally that, after what Barry did to him, you know, like, changing him into a hero, he decided to force that upon a bunch of other rogues. But he doesn't tell Wally which ones. So he's like, all those rogues that, like, you know, have redeemed themselves, they might have only redeemed themselves because of me. Because I changed their minds and I made them. So, you know, Piper, like your friend Piper, deep down he might still be a villain. Because, like, his redeeming wasn't real. And same with Heatwave, and the Trickster, and Magenta. Like, all of these villains that had redeemed themselves. And this is the retcon that I really hate. Because I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Heatwave's redemption was always something that I really enjoy. Like, I think it's one of the most underrated parts of Flash comics. Like, Heatwave in general is a very underrated character. Like, if you've read the Carrie Bates run, you know, Carrie Bates does an entire arc where, you know, Heatwave redeems himself. He goes to therapy, he gets therapy, he becomes a good guy. And so now, like, and he becomes a friend of Barry Allen. And so now, with Johns having the Top saying, like, oh, maybe none of that even mattered, and it wasn't actually therapy that helped him, he didn't actually work towards becoming a good person, instead it was just mind control, and I'm forcing him to be a good person, you know, it's very understandable for someone like me to be upset about that, you know, and be like, well, that sucks. Like, why can't the characters who redeem themselves just be characters who redeemed themselves? Like, out of all the characters that kind of switched very quickly and mysteriously, the Trickster is the only one. And that's the only character out of these where I can be like, alright, if you want to make the Trickster evil again by saying that he was only good because of mind control, I can believe that. But when it comes to the Piper and Heatwave and even Magenta, it's like, those are very specific characters who went through pretty long redemption arcs, so it sucks if you're just going to be like, well, they were never actually redeemed, they were just mind controlled. That's what I don't like about this, and that's probably why I will rank The Secret of Barry Allen pretty low, because it makes all these retcons that just aren't very good retcons. You know, the retcon with the Top, the retcons with Barry Allen, making him a really terrible person, you know, and the retcons with some of Wally's villains. And so the Top is like, one day, you know, I might just take these mind controls away, and then your entire world will fall on top of you as all these villains, like all these heroes that call themselves your friends or allies, suddenly turn against you, Wally. And then he gets away. Meanwhile, the Trickster, Heatwave, Piper, and Magenta all meet up together because they're going to go and try and find Murmur. And Trickster's like, you gotta be careful, like, you gotta be ready, because it's not going to be easy to find Murmur. And he reiterates that they are heroes and that the city is going to see them for who they are. So now that we've learnt what we've just learnt from the Top, it's like, are they really heroes? Like, is Trickster actually a hero, or is he mind-controlled? Yeah. Wally goes and visits with Oliver Queen and Connor Hawke to talk to them about what the Top told him, which is that, you know, some of the rogues might still be villains that are under mind control, and yeah, we'll have to, like, he's just asking if they can help him figure out which rogues are which. The top actually did try to change, like, Captain Cold's mind, and it didn't stick. So we're also retconning that when Captain Cold and Gold Glider opened up, like, a mercenary business, it was because they were under mind control. So we're retconning the whole thing. We're retconning all of the rogues that went straight after Barry died because Barry was no longer around and there was no reason for them to be rogues anymore. We're retconning that away and it just being mind control. Even though it makes more sense. Like, the other circumstance makes more sense. That they would stop doing what they're doing because Barry's not around and so they don't want to be rogues anymore, you know? Cold receives a call about Boomerang's death and immediately decides to plan a funeral for him. The trickster makes fun, the second trickster, the new trickster, not James Jesse, the other trickster, the younger one, makes fun of Boomerang's clothes, and Cole just clocks him out, just punches him in the face. And Cole's just like, we take care of our own, Martin. Let's go see this kid, because he learns about Boomerang's son, and so they're gonna go and find Owen and see if he's okay, because chances are Owen's gonna need a new family, and the rogues are probably best suited for that because, you know, he's the son of Captain Boomerang. I feel like it's one of those situations where, like, what if Wally went to Owen first? Would the circumstances be different where he would be able to convince Owen to do good instead of joining the rogues? You know, to not be like his father? Wally finds some police outside of a vehicle, including Officer Chaya, and he thinks that someone's been murdered because you can smell Linda's perfume, and he's like, oh no, like, the murmurs out and about at the moment, like, did he kill Linda? Like, let me through, let me see her. And it turns out it's not actually a murder scene, it's just, you know, a couple of kids drop some paint cans on top of a police vehicle, and then Wally hears a voice behind him that's like, hey, Red, and Linda Park from Channel 4 News, TV reporter, appears behind Wally. She's like, how about an interview? Because obviously she doesn't know that, actually, no, she does know that Wally is the Flash, but she's pretending that she doesn't know, obviously. Yeah, Linda's a reporter again, finally. We went through a long period of time where she wasn't a news reporter, and I didn't like it, and now she's a news reporter again, which is great. This is what she should be, and I hope it sticks around for, well, hopefully forever, but I doubt it will. But yeah, that's the end of The Secret of Barry Allen. Overall, bunch of unnecessary retcons that I didn't like. However, Linda is a news reporter again. So it's another one of those things where it's like, Geoff takes like one step forward and two steps back. Where it's like, oh, he made Linda a news reporter again, but also he kind of like ruined Barry Allen's reputation and just ruined a lot of like the character development of a lot of like the rogues. You know? While he's improved the character development of like Captain Cold and stuff, he's ruining the reputation and development of like Heatwave. But yeah, that's the end of Secret of Barry Allen, which means all we've got left is the final 2 issues of Identity Crisis. Alright, so issue 6 begins immediately where issue 5 ended, which was with the death of Jack Drake and Digger Harkness, aka Captain Boomerang. Tim Drake arrives home screaming for his dad, where he like rips off his costume as he runs into the room where his father's dead body lays with a boomerang lodged in its chest. He screams, "Dad!" And then he climbs over to his dad, like he just runs over to him. And like he already knows that his dad is dead. He doesn't even need to check his pulse, but he just wants to get that boomerang out of its damn chest. So he starts pulling it and he's like, "Get it out! Please! Please!" And then Bruce, Batman, approaches from behind and he's just like, "Tim, it's okay. It's okay." And Tim just turns around to him, his eyes bawling out. And Bruce just hugs Tim tight. He's like, "I've got you. Batman and Robin, orphans. And this is the second time now that Batman, Bruce Wayne, has had to deal with a child losing their parents, or the third time technically if you count his own. He did it previously with Dick, and now he's done it with Tim. The Batman would actually adopt Tim going forward, like Tim would officially be adopted by Bruce Wayne. And there's also a page later on where we have like a 3-panel piece because Green Arrow is talking about how everyone has lost people that they are close to. You know, Geoff lost his sister Terra, Wonder Woman lost her mother, Aquaman lost his son, you know, Hal Jordan died, and so Green Arrow and Flash both lost brothers, Iris lost Barry, and Bruce lost his parents, because he goes on to say, and there are heroes who have lost their parents as well, and it shows a panel of Bruce standing next to Alfred, and Alfred being like, I'm sorry. And then Dick standing next to Bruce with Bruce saying, I'm sorry. And then a picture of Tim standing next to Bruce with Bruce saying, I'm sorry. So it's a parallel between the 3 characters that they've all essentially lived the same kind of experience. So Captain Boomerang and Jack Drake's deaths are broadcasted on the news, and Owen Mercer, who is the wait, is it Owen Mercer? I think that's his name, right? The son of Diggle Harkness arrives to see his dad's body, and this is one of those sad things where it's like, because he's the son of a supervillain, he's not allowed to see his own father's dead body, even though Owen isn't a supervillain at this point. He's not allowed to see his dad, and they just won't let him in, because they think Owen is a rogue already, or they just assume he is, and they think, oh, if he goes and sees his dad's body, his dad's just going to come back to life, because it's happened before. So they don't let Owen in, and that really upsets Owen, and it pushes him to the point of joining the Rogues. Because Captain Cold decides to hold a funeral for Captain Boomerang. We'll actually see how that funeral plays out in an issue of The Flash, once we get back to that. And Captain Cold also contacts Owen, and like, he doesn't even offer Owen to become Captain Boomerang. Personally, he would prefer it if Owen stayed out of that life, but Owen is determined to follow in his father's footsteps, and he has a great line in this where he says, like, you know, when you throw a boomerang, it always comes back. Which was a great line. Also, while Owen is talking to this agent where his father was killed, he sees Batman and is like, why is he here? And the agent's like, who's here? And Owen's like, Batman, he's right behind you. And the agent's just like, I don't know what you're talking about. And Owen's like, he's right there. Why is he here? Let me talk to him. And the agent's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Now leave. And so it's like they're trying to keep Batman's involvement a secret. So Clark returns home to Lois after everything's happened. Obviously, he's really sad, so he's just happy to get home to his wife. And sadly, Malcolm Merlyn, Deadshot, and not Malcolm Merlyn, Arthur. I'm so used to calling him Malcolm Merlyn because that's become like his name now. Arthur King, aka Merlyn, and Deadshot and Monocle, who were all convicted, are now being set free because they didn't murder Captain Boomerang or Jack Drake or anyone else. And even though Deadshot has a gun on him right now, he gets set free because he's worked for the Suicide Squad, and that just gets him a get out of jail free card. And so they leave, and Merlyn says to himself that now that they're free from the court, they can continue with their plan. And we have a shot of Dr. Light sitting in a throne, thinking to himself and smiling. Oliver Queen sees a glimpse of Deathstroke in a window while he's standing on a ledge. Like, Deathstroke seems to be behind him, so he quickly turns around and shoots an arrow at him, but Deathstroke disappears. However, Ollie managed to catch Deathstroke's mask with his arrow, which Deathstroke was hoping that he would do that, because he left a note as he left that says, "This is yours. We are not done." So he's like given Ollie his mask, and I guess Slade has a bit of a grudge against Ollie that they will probably continue going into the Green Arrow book, or either that or Slade is referring to Dr. Light's plan not being over yet. I guess we'll find out. So that's when Wally West shows up, and he explains to Ollie that when Dr. Light received all of his memories, Wally had a flash of Dr. Light's memories in his head, and he noticed that originally he remembered the Dr. Light situation a little bit differently. There were 7 people. But the second time he remembered it, he clearly saw that Batman was there too, which means there wasn't 7 people dealing with Dr. Light back on the day that they erased his memories. There was 8, because Batman was there. But why did he forget that Batman was there? And why doesn't Batman remember being there? Well, it's because Wally manages to push Ollie into telling him that Dr. Light isn't the only person whose memories got wiped that night. Batman's did too. Batman wasn't originally there to begin with, but Batman and Superman are always known for coming back to the JLA Watchtower to help with cleanup. So Batman went there, and when he got there, he saw Sue Dibney's body, and he saw what they were doing with Dr. Light, and he immediately freaked out and began yelling intensely at all the Justice League members, being like, "What the hell are you doing? Like, get your hands off of him. What are you doing?" And Batman's like ready to fight them because of what they are doing to Dr. Light. And so Zatanna, unprompted, uses her magic on Batman to freeze him, which shocks everyone. You know, Hal is just like, "Let him go!" And Ollie's just like, "What the hell are you thinking?" And so they come to the conclusion that they've got to wipe Batman's mind, because if they don't, it'll be the end of the Justice League as they know it, because Batman will call for the team to be disbanded because he can't trust anyone, because of everything that's been going on. So yeah, they've completely wiped Batman's mind. And Wally is shocked at this revelation. He's just like, "How could you do this?" And Ollie's like, "You know Batman, like, he probably could have done the same thing to us. He probably already did." And Wally's just like, "He'd never do that." And Ollie's like, "You believe what you want. You telling me I'm wrong? Haven't you learned anything yet? Think about your own life, Wally. Everything you've done to keep your secret safe. You don't just wear the mask for yourself. It's for your wife, your parents, even for one day, your children. There are animals out there, Wally, and when it comes to family, we can't always be there to defend them. But the mask will." And so Wally's just like, "So that's it? Bruce still has no idea?" And Ollie's like, "What are you talking about? He's Bruce Wayne. Like, he probably has an idea. He's the world's greatest detective. He's probably figuring it out right now." And meanwhile, we find out that the Calculator, who is a supervillain that we've been seeing throughout this event, was the one who sent Captain Boomerang to kill Jack Drake. Was I calling him Jim earlier? If I did, I'm sorry. I meant to call him Jack. To kill Jack Drake. And so Merlin is calling him, being like, "Did you send him to his death?" And Calculator was like, "No, I didn't know he was going to die there. I didn't know that somebody was going to give Jack a gun. Like, it wasn't me that gave the gun to Jack. But an anonymous person did call me and ask me to send someone to kill Jack. So I hired Captain Boomerang because he was the cheapest and I believe the most efficient. And now he's dead. So somebody gave Jack a gun, and we got to find out who." And so, Batman's currently searching for the Calculator. He enters a room and finds that the Calculator isn't in there, and he just finds a note that says, "Bats, we're not all morons." So they, outsmarted him. Meanwhile, Dr. Midnight, a member of the JSA, is continuing his autopsy on Sue's body, where he finds out what really killed her, because up until now it's been a mystery on what killed her. He finds that in her brain there are indentations in the brain that caused a blockage of her bloodstream, which is what killed her. The indentations, when zoomed in on, look exactly like footprints, because that's exactly what they are. So whoever assassinated Sue Dibney, shrunk down and went inside her and killed her. How many characters are able to shrink down? I mean, you got the Atom. So immediately, everyone's just like, call Ray right now. And I'm reading this thinking, well, there's other people that can shrink. It's not just Ray. Why wouldn't they immediately go towards, like, Bug-Eyed Bandit? Like, Bug-Eyed Bandit is a supervillain who has faced Atom in the past, who has shrinking powers. Pretty sure Bug-Eyed Bandit appeared as one of, like, the cameo villains earlier on in this book. Maybe it was him. But no, they immediately go to thinking it's Ray. So, we cut to Ray with his ex-wife, Jean Loring. Jean believes that Captain Boomerang was the one that tried to kill them. She's like, wow, like, Boomerang? Like, that just feels weird. He doesn't seem like a criminal mastermind. He's like, Ray's just like, actually, I'm happy for a little more than that. And Jean's just like, Dr. Palmer. And they get ready to have sex. It's like, I'm not sure I like that look in your eyes. And Ray's like, what look? And he turns the light off and he's like, I don't see anything. And so that's where that issue ends. And now we move into the final issue of Identity Crisis, where we will find out who killed Sue Dibney and what is Dr. Light's plan. Yeah. I think I already know what his plan is, because I've read some comics that take place after this, so I kind of seen what Dr. Light gets up to after this book. I'll talk about it a little bit at the end. But yeah, we're going to see if Ray Palmer actually did kill her or not. And so we make it to the final issue, which immediately begins with us discovering who really killed Sue Dibney. Ray is talking to his wife, Jean, and Jean mentions mentions to Ray, like, did you ever find out who wrote that protect yourself note to Jack Drake? And Ray is like, no, that's the... And then he stops mid-sentence and he looks at her and his face immediately drops. He goes over to the light switch and he's like, how'd you know there was a note? And Jean's just like, because it was in the news. And Ray's like, no, it wasn't. Batman took that note for himself. He never told anyone outside of a very few select people, so how did you know about the note? And so it turns out that Jean was the one who murdered Sue. Now you're probably wondering, why would Jean Loring, a regular woman who seems just like a nice person, was good friends with people like Sue, is the wife of Ray Palmer, like, why would she kill Sue? Well, it's because Sue's death was an accident, but it was an accident that still involved kind of malicious intent. Basically, the best way to explain this is Jean is insane. Like, she is actually insane. So after her and Ray broke up, she became so distraught that she would do anything to get Ray to come back to her. So what she decided to do was she decided to put on his suit, shrink down, go inside Sue Dibney's head, and try to knock her out so that people would think that she got attacked, and so any other heroes who had wives would quickly run back to them. You know, like, she knew Ralph would go straight to Sue, Clark would go to Lois, and Ray, you know, would come to Jean. And when she went inside Sue Dibney's head, she grew a 1/12 of the size bigger and accidentally killed her. Created the blockage in her brain, which killed her. And so she had no choice but to finish the job because she didn't want to go to jail for killing someone. So she grabbed a flamethrower and, incinerated Sue's body so that they would think that somebody else killed her. And that's it. That's how Sue died. It was Jean. And Ray is disgusted by his wife. Like, he's literally throwing up at the thought of his wife doing that, and apparently doing that for him. Like, killing one of his friends, or just even hurting one of his friends for him. Like, it's just a messed up situation. And Jean's just like, what are you gonna do, Ray? Like, are you going to knock me out? Are you gonna send your wife to jail? You know, I love you. I did this for you. And then the next shot, we find Ray standing outside Arkham Asylum because he's given Jean to them. And so Jean has now become an inmate at Arkham Asylum. And Ray, after that, he hands his Justice League transmitter to, his receiver, to one of the people working at Arkham Asylum and tells them to keep that. And the guy working at Arkham Asylum is like, hey, it's going off. Like, the Justice League needs you. And Ray Palmer's like, no, they don't. Not anymore. And he puts on his costume and shrinks down and runs away into the grass. And nobody hears of him again for weeks. The Justice League go searching for him to no avail. They're trying to find him and they just can't find him anywhere. But after this, everyone else kind of slowly manages to move on. This is where things start to pick up for everyone. There's silver linings, you know. There's some big decisions that are made for certain characters, like Firehawk. She decides to leave the Justice League alongside Ray Palmer. However, you know, Ray did it by running away and becoming a fugitive or something. Or just, you know, going missing. Dick Grayson continuously tries to call Tim to talk to him, and Tim just ignores him. And there's actually a pretty heartbreaking shot of Tim just, like, covered in, like, a blanket, just, like, cowering on the couch. Obviously depressed, missing his father. You know, Ollie coming together with Ralph. Ralph just being like, I can't believe she's gone. And Ollie just being like, just talk to her. You know, even though she's gone, it's still worth talking to her because she's always going to be by your side. And so Wally and Ollie go back to having another conversation where it eventually leads back to the conversation of Wally saying, like, so did Batman know? Like, did he really know what happened to him? And Ollie's like, I told you, like, remember when I told you that Clark hears what he wants to hear? Well, Batman knows what he wants to know. And so we find a shot of Bruce approaching the tombstones of his parents, and he leaves a batch of flowers there and says, please take care of Jack Drake and our friend Sue. Meanwhile, Clark goes and visits Ma Kent, and she's like, maybe you should take some time off. And immediately, as soon as she says that, Clark puts on his costume. And is like, you know, I can't. That's not what I do. And she's just like, I know. And Clark's like, you just said that so I put on the costume, didn't you? That's what Muppets are for. You really do look handsome, though. And Clark kisses her on the forehead and says, I love you, Ma, no matter what. And she whispers, exactly, Clark, as Clark flies off, no matter what. And Clark thinks to himself, she doesn't even bother to raise her voice. She knows I hear every word. He heads to the Justice League headquarters where they're talking about how they've lost 2 reserves and that they're going to have to find some people to replace Ray and Firehawk. And that Ray still hasn't been found. Nobody's been able to see what he's thinking. Like, nobody's been able to find him. And Flash is kind of zoning out during this meeting because he's looking at Batman. And Batman's just like, is there a problem, Wally? He's like, nothing, say what you're thinking. And Wally's like, nothing. No problem at all. And Bruce just looks at him. And then heads out on a job of his own to go and deal with Clayface. He gets a call from Alfred to go deal with him. And Kyle also goes and heads off and does his stuff. Like, all of the Justice League members leave the room to go and do superhero stuff while Wally remains in the room by himself, just thinking about what he knows and that he has to keep it a secret. And so we end with Ralph at home talking to somebody. And eventually you kind of clue onto the fact that he's not just talking to anybody, he's talking to Sue. He's talking to Sue about life, how, like, he went out for dinner with Wally and Kyle. There's actually a moment in this where Wally asks Ollie to come out to dinner with him and Clark, and I think there was a typo in this book, because he says, like, oh, you can come out to dinner with Clark and I, because we know how you used to go out to dinner with Clark and Barry. And I think it was supposed to say Hal and Barry, because it doesn't really make sense that Ollie would have gone out to dinner regularly with Clark and Barry. Like, Hal and Barry were his close friends, you know? So I think that was a bit of a typo. And, so yeah, Ralph is talking to Sue, says, meanwhile, you gotta hear this story Ollie told me. No, just listen. There's this 90-year-old man named Benny who's on his deathbed, and next to him holding his hand, as always, is his wife, Dottie. So Benny says, Dottie, we've been married for over 60 years. When I was drafted into the war, you were by my side. When we lost every penny in the stock market, you were by my side. And now here I am on my deathbed, and again, you were right by my side. Dottie, my love, after all these years, I just want to tell you, you're a jinx. And then Ralph, like, smiles and is like, pretty good, huh? Oh, please, you haven't heard that one before? How do I know? Because I'm your husband. That's... And then all of a sudden he's like, you have to go? No, don't worry. I'll speak to you later. And he climbs into bed and he kind of looks over to the side that Sue would normally be sleeping, and he turns off the light. He says, no, I'm fine, bud. I'm great. Great, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Good night, Sue. And then the lights turn off and he's like, I love you too. And then it ends with Ralph and Sue Dibney, husband and wife. The end. And so that was Identity Crisis. Like, what to say about this, really, that hasn't already been said. Obviously, this book is a very controversial book because of the things that happened in it. You know, the death of Sue Dibney was very controversial, especially how brutal it was. Dr. Light, you know, trying to rape her is a very hard-hitting part of this book. The thing I noticed about this book is there is a lot of misogyny deep within this book, but, you know, because of the fact that, like, the biggest problems in this book, you know, the one who was responsible for killing Sue was a woman, and, like, the killer's going after women consistently throughout the book. But I wouldn't say that that's, like, I'm not calling Brad Meltzer misogynistic. Like, you can tell when you're reading the story that he's doing that on purpose. Like, he's playing with the idea of fridging, which is a concept within comic books often applied to women, where a woman is killed in a comic book just to progress the development of a male character. And so I think Brad is exploring that idea, and that's why he does it a lot in this book. It's why, you know, it's centered entirely around the fridging of a woman, and how it affects Ralph Dibney as a character. It's almost like he's kind of mocking that kind of storytelling, showing why it's not a good way to tell a story, like exploiting that kind of storytelling, resorting to killing off characters just to progress the development of other characters, especially women. So yeah, I'm not going to knock Brad Meltzer for that, because I don't think that there was any malicious intent coming out of it. He just wanted to explore that kind of writing style that had become pretty popular by this point in time. Not saying that I enjoyed seeing Sue Dibney get murdered and stuff. Like, of course I didn't. That is definitely the hardest part about reading this book. But I'm also not going to say that the book is bad just because of the awful things that happen in it. The writing in this book is incredible. Like, there's a reason why this book won New York bestseller. Like, it's a good book. Like, it's got great writing. It's got incredible art by Rags Morales. It just has some controversial things in it that people don't like. But I don't think that's a reason to call the book bad. I think it's just a reason to say that the book is just not your cup of tea or not something that you enjoy. But overall, I think it is a good book. Like, I really enjoyed reading Identity Crisis. I think it is a book worth reading as well. But I don't think that it's the best when it comes to telling this kind of story. Because obviously the story that Brad Meltzer wanted to tell was a story about the human side of superheroes, getting to see superheroes in a more grounded situation that involved seeing them, you know, suffer just like anyone else, and be vulnerable. However, the plot is very convoluted and confusing. Like, I think a murder mystery was the wrong way to do it. You know, I think using a murder mystery to show the vulnerability of superheroes was not a good idea, because it's just too confusing at times, and there's a lot going on. If you want an example of a Justice League arc that does this idea much better, I would highly recommend reading a story arc called Pain of the Gods, which is a story arc. It's issues 101 to 106 of JLA from the 90s. And it's written by Chuck Austen, and it just does this kind of story idea much better. Like, it executes it a lot better. It's just a 5-issue story arc about the Justice League and their vulnerability as humans. It actually came out before this, ironically. Just before Identity Crisis came out. It essentially just deals with the Justice League of, like, you know, days where they fail and how they deal with that failure and how it makes them vulnerable. And the reason why I think it's better than this is because the stuff that happens in that arc is a lot less outlandish and a little bit more believable, a little bit more grounded for a comic book. Like, it's obviously a comic book about superheroes, so it's still got, like, fantastical elements in it, but it's just not as complicated. It's not a murder mystery. It's just some very straightforward stuff. It's simple but effective. And so, yeah, if you want to read something like Identity Crisis that is better than Identity Crisis at, you know, conveying the same message that Identity Crisis was trying to convey, then read Pain of the Gods and don't read Identity Crisis. I'd say only read Identity Crisis if you really want to, but the best idea is mainly just to avoid it and instead read Pain of the Gods, because it's just a much better execution of this whole idea. And so, yeah, that's going to be it for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed this. It's been a long time coming. I've been preparing for Identity Crisis for a very long time, and I'm happy to finally get to it and cover it. And so next we are going to be switching back to The Flash. We're going to be doing Rogue War. So we're going to be doing all the issues, like the remaining issues of Geoff Johns' Flash, and then there's a few issues after Geoff Johns' Flash that lead directly up to Infinite Crisis. So we're going to be covering all of those. I think it's issues 219 to 230. And then after that, we'll be doing Countdown to Infinite Crisis, which I am really looking forward to. I've never read Infinite Crisis before. So yeah, looking forward to that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you next week for Flash. Have a good one.
In the heart of the shadows, secrets lie. Heroes weep under darkened sky. Bonds are broken, trust betrayed. In the silence, fears invade. Whispers echo in the void. Minds unravel, hearts destroyed. In the darkness, truth concealed. Beneath the mask, wounds revealed. Identity crisis, shadows fall. In the darkness, we lose it all. Echoes betrayal, trust decays. In this night we lose our way. Whispers echo in the void, minds unravel, hearts destroyed. In the darkness, truth concealed, beneath the mask, wounds revealed. Identity crisis, shadows fall. In the darkness we lose it all. Echoes of betrayal, trust decays. In this night we lose our way. Hidden sins come to light. In the end there's no respite. A tale of pain, a web of lies. In the silence, hear the cries from the depths of memories haze. Secrets twist in the blaze, lost in anguish, lost in pain. In this void we remain. Identity crisis, shadows fall. In the darkness we lose it all. Echoes of betrayal, trust decays. In this night we lose our way. Of what's lost, we bear the weight, we pay the cost. In the echoes of despair, we search for light, we grasp for air. Identity crisis, shadows fall. In the darkness we lose it all. Echoes of betrayal, trust decays. In this night we lose our way. When the dawn breaks the night, in the echoes we seek the light.